Hello and welcome to LDEI Live Online. I'm your host, Sheila Fry. Today we will hear from a distinguished panel of speakers about how plant-based eating is trending and increasingly part of mainstream food culture. For restaurants, offering vegan choices is increasingly expected. For home cooks, more people are experimenting with vegan meals, even if it's a few times a week. Our moderator is Ellen Canner, Huffington Post Meatless Monday blogger and the syndicated columnist called The Edgy Veggie. She is author of Miami Vegan and Feeding the Hungry Ghost, and others as well. A fifth-generation Floridian, she lives in Miami and serves on the Miami boards of Slow Food and Common Threads. Ellen's mission is to connect us with the source for a healthier environment, healthier bodies, stronger human relationships, and a stronger economy. She loves to spread the word and the joy about a plant-based diet accessible to all. And now we welcome Ellen Kenner.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, LDEI, and welcome, 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 everyone. Uh, Very nice intro, Sheila. I appreciate it. Um, and I am super excited to introduce the all-star Vegan Means Business panel. Kathy Gold, in addition to being our illustrious immediate past president, is a triple threat. She has a lot of experience in finance, in culinary arts, and now in recipe development. She has been 20 years in investment banking and then decided, you know what, I'm going to run a cooking school instead. So she ran in the kitchen cooking school and is now doing food writing and recipe development. Kristen Hartke is a New York Times-based food journalist, recipe developer, and photographer. She's just completed teaching at American University in DC and writes for numerous outlets, including Washington Post and Food and Wine. You're going to taste some of her talents in works like Mastering the Art of Plant-Based Cooking, and I am going to give you a brief vegan overview, give you a sense of the market and how you make it work for you. And Kristen and Kathy are going to take you on a deeper dive. If you've got questions, raise your little virtual hand and then we'd like to talk to you and answer your questions. Okay. The Secretary for Health and Human Services is calling beef tallow healthy. I don't know if you guys know about the Liver King, something like 10 million TikTok followers espousing a raw liver diet. And of course, 11 Madison Park just added meat back to the menu. So why are we here? To sell you on the business advantages of plant-based. Bold move. So let's take a look at this market and even what to call it, because like life, it's complicated. Sheila, could we have the first slide, please? We've got a Venn diagram coming at you. There it is. Thank you. As you can see in the upper left, vegan, also sometimes called plant-based, means really you only eat plants. Nothing with a face, nothing with a mother. Um, Plant-based means you're pretty much that, but maybe not exclusively. And then even omnivore has sort of changed meaning or the terminology. It still means you eat what you like, but there was briefly a time when flexitarian was the term, and it meant, okay, eat a smash burger today and a veggie burger tomorrow. And really, the only thing outside this Venn diagram is a current trend called the carnivore diet. But if you are anywhere on this spectrum, the commonality is plants. whole grains, nuts, beans, seeds, all that stuff. Call it what you will. The market is an interesting mix. It's mostly you. It's women, it's baby boomers, and it's also a fair amount of Gen Zers. It is also Ozempic users, people on weight loss drugs because they eat less, they want a more nutrient-dense diet. Blacks are the fastest growing sector of new vegans, and 1 in 4 Americans is consciously eating less meat. The main driver for going plant-based is wellness and improved physical and mental health. Um, Consumers link that with a cleaner way to live, especially when 70% of most Americans' diet is ultra processed. It all adds up to less meat, more plants. And if you aren't incorporating that into your business model, you're missing out. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen. There's a trend towards transparency. So while there's still the Beyond Burger, we want to know and understand what we're putting into us. Data Essential reports there is a 62% increase in plant-based menu offerings over the past decade, and places are actively looking to increase. Half of US restaurants now include plant-based options. And you know what? It's not because they love us. It's because of consumer demand. Vegan food and beverage products account for over 40 billion in sales, and that's excluding vegan beauty products and vegan fashion. Mainstream businesses are taking notice. They've seen the light, they've seen the market, and they want a piece of it. You need it too. It's now part of every food sector. Next time you go to the grocery store, look around you. That wall of plant-based milks, that wasn't there a couple years ago. So if you want to add one vegan offering, try oat milk. It has gone up 400% in sales in the past 4 years. It's creamy, it's an easy swap for dairy, it's sustainable, and even Starbucks isn't charging extra for it anymore. Yay. Airlines, hotels and resorts, hospitals. Now there's an idea, feeding sick people healthy food. Entertainment arenas and education, especially colleges and universities. UC Berkeley, Cornell, NYU are all increasing their vegan offerings. I was just at University of Miami and there was a bunch of food trucks and they all had painted on the outside vegan options available. Events. I attended LDEI's first ever MFK Fisher Literary Symposium this spring, and I want to give a shout out to co-chairs Erin Byers-Murray, Emily Hawes, and Kathy Gold, who made sure vegan attendees like me got fed. I recently spoke to Sierra Club Miami, and one guy said, "I will not sit with anyone who isn't, who isn't vegan. I will not sit with anyone eating plant-based. Sorry, omnivore." Well, that's his decision. But I think for most vegans, we like to hang with our omnivore friends. And certainly in Miami, which has such a mix of cultures and cuisines, my Argentine friend, Argentinians are notorious meat eaters, took me to her favorite Argentine restaurant and she said, "No, trust me." So in addition to all the beef offerings, there were some fantastic vegan empanadas, vegan spinach, vegan mushroom. And when they found out I was vegan, they made me a special salad and dessert. So I'm coming back, I'm bringing my friends, and I'm bringing my wallet. Doesn't always work that way. You're going to hear more about that from Kristen and Kathy. Though people are choosing vegan for the health halo, it's, vegans like to have fun too, like the rest of us. Other big selling vegan products include vegan tacos, vegan pizza, vegan cookies, and of course, with vegan cookies, we like Ben and Jerry's vegan ice cream. I am now going to try and address the protein issue because it's come back with a vengeance thanks to the carnivore craze. Vegans get plenty of protein. We all do. Americans consume more than we need. And need I remind you, meat isn't the only source of protein. There's plants. There's tempeh, tofu, edamame, quinoa, nuts. Even broccoli has protein. And let us not forget beans. Beans actually out-protein meat for a much lower environmental impact and a much lower cost. A University of Illinois study proves there's no difference between animal protein and plant protein for building muscle. That accounts for some of the interest in the documentary The Game Changers about these totally ripped vegan athletes. Sheila, if I could have the next slide, please. Okay. Imagine a bodybuilder. This happens to be Tory Washington, and he is a very sweet guy. But if you get to see his picture, you'll see he could easily kick my butt. You may not care about building muscle or mitigating climate change, but as a business, you care about bottom line. US beef prices are at the highest they've been since 1980, and this is according to the Federal Reserve. That's because our herd numbers are at their lowest. It just costs too much to raise livestock. And if you're importing beef from Canada, Brazil, and Australia, you're paying tariffs on top of that. So, okay, I think it's time we address a plant-based menu. Plant-based test markets better than vegan, and vegan does better than healthy. We want to be healthy. As you recall, that is the main driver for people going vegan. However, as a food descriptor, it sounds sad, doesn't it? Um, we want to be fun. So I'm a food writer, right? And I'm talking to other content creators here. There are three words I think are very lazy in food writing: awesome, tasty, and veggie. Awesome tells you nothing. Tasty tells you nothing. Something could tasty really bad. And veggies just sound demeaning. I think vegetables deserve more respect. So bring the whole sensory element into building a menu. I like to get a little kinky with it. Descriptions like whipped, torched, charred, smacked, smashed, blasted, they're kind of fun. And you can be gentler. You can say creamed, infused. Remember, people want to know where their food is coming from, so anytime you can play up the locally sourced ingredients, we love that. And if you're thinking, you know what, I don't need to bother with this because I don't get any vegan clients, maybe it's your menu. Most foods that we like begin with plants. So you already have the building blocks there. But if your offerings clearly don't indicate that, we may not take a chance. We will not attend your business. We will not bring our wallets. So show people what you got. Talk up the flavor, talk up the mouthfeel, talk up the spice. You don't have to talk about being vegan. You can just, good food is good food. To be a leader in the industry, taking more plant-based options into your business model is like the most impactful action you can take. It shows you know and care about your clients. You're giving them what they want, and you're getting what you want too. Better bottom line, increased business, and you might even help save the planet too. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen. Thanks very much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Ellen. That was such a great introduction to our conversation today. So I am going to give me just a second. I am going to pull up my little presentation and so that we can talk about, here we go. There we go. Um, so I wanted to really focus on the idea of building menus that are very, very inclusive. And obviously, as someone who I've been vegetarian most of my life, vegan now for I think about 10 years, and I am very accustomed to going places and struggling to find food to eat. So, and I've raised a daughter who's now 29. I raised her from birth on a plant-based diet and certainly saw the struggles that she had whenever she went to summer camp or on a school field trip. And, or as she got older and went to high school dances, that kind of thing, of just being able to eat even just a simple snack. So there are small things that we can do, certainly in the restaurant industry, to be more inclusive and offer more items on our menus, but also be able to provide new opportunities for other people. And one of them is that I think we are forgetting that when people go to restaurants and they might be looking for something that is plant-based or vegan, they might not actually follow a plant-based or vegan lifestyle. They may also have a food allergy. So maybe, like, I have a friend who is allergic to eggs and she's allergic to dairy, but she actually loves meat. So her diet is, she's often looking for plant-based options when she's going to restaurants because she has to be thinking about these sort of dairy and egg issues. So having these variety of different kinds of foods is actually really encompassing a much larger segment of the dining population than I think a lot of restaurant owners are necessarily considering. So I want to see if I can get us to our next. Hang on. Next. There we go. So starting here with the diet plate is dead. And I am starting here because I have found for many years, and it still happens on menus, that the item on the menu, and often there is only one item on the menu that is available that is vegan, is what I laughingly would refer to as the diet plate. It is the idea that this is someone who is on a diet. They're not trying to eat too much. They want small portions. They only want to eat vegetables. And I do only want to eat vegetables, but I want to eat a variety of vegetables. And it tends to be something that is some kind of a salad. Or maybe a hummus wrap. And if people would stop making hummus wraps, that would make my life perfect. So there are sort of this idea that there are sort of these certain things all the time. But there are lots of reasons why somebody is looking for plant-based on the menu. So as Ellen already touched on, a lot of it really at the top of the list is health and wellness. I mean, people are just looking to, have a diet that they think is going to, really provide them with better digestion. It's going to impact, their long-term health outcomes. I mean, they're looking for very specific kinds of things. Also, we have people who are vegan or plant-based because they really care about ethical and animal welfare. This is something that's cruelty-free. It's very important to them. I think we're starting to have a larger segment of the population, especially younger people, Gen Z, who are very interested in sustainability issues. So they are looking at plant-based foods as something that can reduce their carbon footprint. And then, as I alluded to before, people who have dietary restrictions and allergies. And kind of once we start focusing a little bit on the idea of allergen-friendly items on our menus, that really opens up the menu to a lot of different people. And then I think we have people who are just genuinely like to try different kinds of food, and they like creativity in the kitchen, and they're excited to go somewhere and have something to eat that they haven't had before. So the reason that I have 5 salad bowls on this plate, on this page, is to illustrate an experience that I once had, which is I was invited by a friend to go to a fancy 6-course meal, and for a big event. And I was very, very careful in advance to contact, actually, I knew who the chef was, contact in advance and say, I'm coming to this event. I'm vegan. I want to make sure that the kitchen staff is aware of this. The chef knows, like, I was very careful about this. And got to the event and seated at a table with about 10 people. And my friend and I, and my friend was actually a sponsor of the event. And didn't know the other 8 people actually at our table. And for the next 5 courses, I was delivered the exact same salad. Not even like a slightly different salad, but the exact same salad on every single plate and on every single course, every single time. And over time, the other people sitting at our table, who all happened to be French, they started to become incensed. Every time that salad plate would come out again with that same salad, they would say, are you kidding? Did you just bring her another salad? Is there nothing that the chef can do in the kitchen to make something different? And it was very much a feeling of that, my needs were not important. And this was a chef who knew better. So I think it's important to realize that we are in the hospitality industry, and I have cooked at events with celebrity chefs where I have suggested in advance we should have something prepared for vegan guests, and I have been shunted aside, and then suddenly there were 5 people who needed to have meals prepared for them, and everyone looks at me panicked, and I would have to rush and come up with something. So, and that shouldn't happen. I mean, it shouldn't be necessary to work that way. So I think it's just important to realize that plant-based diners, they're ready to eat, and they are looking for something exciting and interesting and different, and that it is on chefs to provide that for them. So this is actually an article that I wrote for the Washington Post in 2018 that was hugely popular. And I wrote this for the weekend section. It was a cover story, and about, as you can see, 9 vegan-friendly restaurants where everyone can eat well no matter their diet. And the idea behind this article, when I was talking to the editor about it, was that there are studies that show that when a group of people are going out to eat together, and you have people with a variety of dietary needs in that group, that they will go look at a menu and they will walk away from a menu that doesn't accommodate everybody. So, and I kind of want to take off the plate here. I'm going to take off the plate people with celiac disease, because there are very few restaurants, unfortunately, that really cater beautifully to people with celiac disease. So I'm going to kind of take the people who actually are allergic to gluten, take that off of the plate here. But let's just say most other people, when they're looking for a restaurant. So groups of diners are looking for that. And when I did this story for the Washington Post, when it came out, because it was a weekend section, it would come out on Fridays. And that weekend, a couple of days later, my husband and I just happened to stop at one of these restaurants uh, for dinner, like an early dinner on our way home from a movie. And we were sitting there eating our meal, and we had one of the dishes that I had recommended, this beautiful eggplant dish, and we were eating this dish, and and we had eaten so much food that there was sort of this one piece of eggplant left on our dish, and we were sort of like debating over, could we actually manage to eat another mouthful? And the hostess of the restaurant, she walked by and she said, you've just got that one piece of eggplant left, you need to eat it. And I said, I said, I know we were just so full. We just don't know if we can manage to eat another bite. And she said, do you know that a picture of that dish is on the cover of the Washington Post weekend section? And people have been coming in all weekend with the section and saying, pointing to that picture and saying, I want that picture. I want this dish. And my husband pointed to me and he said, well, she wrote the story. And this woman turned and said, you wrote the story. And then every table around us, and the restaurant was full, every table around us, every single person overhearing this said, that's why we're here. We came here for that. And if there's a better demonstration of what people are looking for, then I don't know what there is. But every single table around us, it was about 10 tables, they all were there because of that article, which was suggesting that there are things that everybody would be able to eat at that restaurant. So, but while I'm talking about it, I think that what's important to understand is you can do very small tweaks to recipes in order to make them vegan friendly. It doesn't have to be a very complicated thing to do. So the first thing, of course, is really focusing on flavor, focusing on texture and focusing on technique. And Ellen talked about this too. So this idea of like charring, roasting, braising, fermenting, there's things that you can do that can, that really add a big punch of flavor to vegetables. When you're trying to kind of like raise the bar, you really want to put that emphasis on flavor. And along with that, then it's thinking about what kind of ingredients that you're using. And for people who are accustomed to eating meat-based dishes, they are accustomed to a certain kind of flavors. And so you have to sort of take that idea and take it into different sorts of ingredients. And so focusing on ingredients that already really have that umami quality to it is so important. So mushrooms, tomatoes, eggplant, using miso can add so much depth of flavor to a dish. Grilled vegetables with miso butter is like not only a very elegant dish, but also is something that has like real layers of flavor that diners can really appreciate. And then also the idea of like having versatility on your menu so that you have something where it's a great dish on its own as a plant-based dish, but then you can have add-ons. So if somebody wants to add chicken, they want to add shrimp to it, then they have that, or tofu, but they have that opportunity to add other things to it, but it's something that already is a really terrific dish by itself. And I think for a restaurant kitchen, that offers a lot of flexibility and it's just a small shift of thinking about how you do it. So, and the pictures here, penne with the eggplant vodka sauce is actually a recipe that I developed for Joe Yonin's book, Mastering the Art of Plant-Based Cooking. And for that recipe, I had been, so my daughter really loves vodka sauce and she grew up primarily vegetarian, but then we switched over to vegan. And so then she sort of was like, oh, I miss having vodka sauce. And I said, there's got to be a way I can do it. And I started thinking about one day I sort of had this revelation that eggplant, the flesh of eggplant, of course, has this unbelievably creaminess to it. And so I thought, well, what if I just like used eggplant? And so I literally steamed eggplant, slipped it out, slipped the flesh out of the skin. And I used that as the base for a traditional vodka sauce. Basically, just instead of using cream, I'm using eggplant. And it, blends up into this like really beautiful, creamy quality. And it also has a depth of flavor that you get from eggplant naturally. So, there are, and I'm suggesting doing these these are whole vegetable options as opposed to necessarily sometimes, you can try to make, for instance, a vodka sauce with, say like an oat milk or something, but I tend to find that the quality and the creaminess isn't quite right. So I'm looking at other ways to do it. The other picture that you see here for whole roasted cabbage with beans is actually one of Joe's recipes from Mastering the Art of Plant-Based Cooking. And it's just like this beautiful, like center of the table kind of dish. It's something you bring out and everybody goes, ooh, it's just like has this beautiful base of braised beans, this cabbage that's been like roasted whole, and it's been, lathered lovingly with spices. It's just sort of a lovely dish, but it also, is something that looks quite impressive when you bring it to the table. So dessert, I am a big fan of dessert. And usually when I go out to eat, I am very disappointed because I don't get to eat dessert. Or if I do, it's like a scoop of sorbet. And so I love to make dessert also. So, and one of my favorite things to do is to make cakes and pies, which you can see the cake that you see pictured here and the pie. Those are both my recipes. And they are also both in Joe's book, Mastering the Art of Plant-Based Cooking. And I absolutely love dessert, and it's not that hard to do, but people get a little bit stuck in the idea that dessert has to be made in very specific ways. But it's really not that hard to convert desserts into ones that can be vegan. But a couple of quick things that you can do, a lot of vegans know, but not everybody else knows that Oreos, for instance, Oreo cookies are vegan. A lot of ginger snaps are actually vegan. And these can be like a great thing start for dessert because you can throw them into a food processor, you can crumble them up, you can use them as, either a topping for something or as a crust for something. So you can use them to create a parfait, like you give that kind of like, so it's kind of like a fun place to start if you need an easy place to go. But I think that there's a real way to convert traditional dessert recipes that use eggs and dairy and create things that are very luscious that actually a lot of diners would eat, and they don't even need to know that it's vegan. Someone's going to love a piece of chocolate cake, whether it's vegan or not, if it's made beautifully. So one of the things I wanted to talk about here was that I think a lot of people are very concerned about allergens in food. And this can actually be something that is also a hindrance for people when they are looking at menus. So again, they might not be vegan, but they may have allergies that make it difficult for them to make certain choices on a menu. So I'd be looking at, so one of the things that I was really impressed by when I've traveled to Ireland the last couple of years on vacation, and Ireland has, I mean, it's a government mandate that all restaurant menus have to list 14 specific food allergens and on their menus. And it's very interesting because sort of once you know what the allergens are and you see it very clearly defined on a menu, it's actually quite easy to then make your choices without having to ask a lot of questions of the wait staff and people having to run back to the kitchen to check on something. It's all there right there, and it makes it a lot easier for diners. And I find that to be really helpful for everybody, whether they are, vegan or not. And here's an example of just one part of a menu at a restaurant in Galway that I really like. And where once like my husband and I learned out pretty quickly, like, okay, if it has I don't know, I can't remember now what it is, but like a 2, a 3, and a 7 next to the description of the dish, then we can't eat it. But as long as it doesn't have a 2, a 3, or a 7, we're good to go. And that's very helpful. It's a quick way. Once you learn the system, it's a very easy way to know what there is to eat. And I appreciate that as a diner. And I think a lot of people find that that takes a lot of stress out of going out to eat to know what's available to them. So because I've been talking about converting recipes and just give you like a few quick tips. First of all, use vegetable broth. Vegetable broth is lovely. And if you use vegetable broth as a base for soups and sauces, especially for sauces, it makes it so much simpler because then you have something that could be interchangeably available to a lot of different diners. One of the things that I find is usually a problem for me as a vegan in restaurants are condiments. And so aioli is a great one that, can easily be plant-based aioli available, which that aioli then can be used for a sauce to top a protein. It can be used, to go on a burger. It could be used for dipping fries. Like it has a lot of different, it can be whisked into a dressing. So it provides a lot of different options. But if you start with a plant-based version, it allows it to just go so much further. Obviously, when you can, use plant-based butter. There's so many good brands out there now that taste fantastic and melt beautifully. There's a lot of really great milks out there, also plant-based milks. I would look for the ones that are clean and don't have a lot of additional thickeners in them. And when you are using plant-based milk and butter and you are trying to convert a recipe, generally the conversion rate is 1-to-1. It's usually almost exactly the same. And so it's not something you have to think about too quickly. I have found that people usually stumble on things like cake recipes because they think they need to have something to replace an egg. And the truth is that you actually don't. And sometimes people will try to make a flax egg, which is when you make flax seeds and water together and get this sort of goo out of it. And I find that as a baker, as a recipe developer, that actually weighs down the cake. So the great idea is to just skip it entirely. You're going to have some kind of oil in there, which is going to provide that tenderness that you would get from like the egg yolks. You're going to have baking powder, baking soda, vinegar, perhaps, and those are going to provide the lift. So you really don't need to have an egg. Just don't worry about it. Two of my favorite ingredients to work with, smoked paprika and miso. Joe Yonan, I used to tease him for putting smoked paprika and everything, but I am now a convert. It's delicious. It has a lot of depth of flavor. It's kind of a quick way to really like deepen a dish. And miso can be used in so many ways. And miso also can be made with a variety of different kinds of items, different kinds of legumes, and it's fun to play with. So you can have I think I have 12 different kinds of miso in my fridge right now. And I use them for different kinds of dishes. Don't skimp on fat. I think, again, this goes back to the beginning when I said the diet plate is dead. People who are vegan are not necessarily on a diet. And meat, because it already is full of fat, has that kind of is already a flavor carrier. It's sort of ready to go. But when you're cooking with foods like tofu and vegetables and fruits that don't have fat naturally in them to be released, then you have to make sure that you are really working well with using fat in your recipe. So olive oil, coconut oil, whatever that is, so that you are, bringing that extra flavor and umami to the dish. And don't forget when you're working on plant-based recipes that, salt, fat, acid, heat, texture, flavor, anything that you would do for a meat dish, you are doing for a plant dish. And that's what people are going to come back for, is for that beautiful, those beautiful layers of flavor. And there we go. I'm done.
But thank you all for joining us. And third position is a great position. I can just say, yes, what she said, exactly right, and continue on from there. So I have a couple of statistics for you. And we were talking about a couple of things that really caught my attention. And one of them was the film Game Changers, which happened to have come up in my Facebook memories today. So I was having a nice little walk down memory lane. And Ellen did happen to mention that. If you can find that to stream, I encourage you. It is really, says Game Changer. It's a mind changer. So it really has a lot of interesting information and quite surprising for some of us who are unaware. And so we talk about vegan diners being active diners. We have a statistic that 30% of vegans and vegetarians dine casually each week, which is 17% of the general population. And 21% dine in fine dining restaurants weekly versus 9% of the populations. So it goes back to what it is you're offering on your menu and how inclusive you're being with the things that you are offering. And we've all had the experience of having to piecemeal from different areas of the menu, and that's fine. We know how to do it. We've become quite adept and masterful, I might say, but it's really nice if there are center of the plate options for us rather than an appetizer, a side dish, whatever it happens to be. And as Kristen said, very easy to customize something and have the vegan option, the vegetarian option be the main attraction, and then those who want to add traditional proteins, meat-based proteins, can easily add it to the menu. And it just gives much more flexibility and appeal to the people who are dining together. I don't know if you've heard the expression, the vegan veto, which is, as we've talked about, it is the vegan in your group who's going to decide where you're going to dine. Pardon me. And so that's a very noteworthy aspect of your crowd and what restaurateurs should be looking at. Talk about the statistic of how many restaurants offer vegan options, and is about 50%. What I'm seeing a lot of statistically from research and anecdotally from walking around and dining out is that some of the newer restaurants are not at all inclusive in any way and are almost aggressively non-inclusive, as if someone said to them, you have to put a vegan item on, and therefore I'm not going to do it. It's really kind of interesting. And we've noted that very high profile 11 Madison Park, EMP, one of our favorite places to dine when we can, has recently, very notably, very publicly gone back to offering meat-based as well as traditional, their plant-based menu. It's still going to be 80%, but boy, did that get a lot of press. The word that I saw probably in 4 of the dozens of articles that I read was the word hubris, as if this is some sort of shame upon him that Daniel Hume decided that he needed to be more inclusive to keep his restaurant going. So that was a very interesting statistic. So if we could have the next slide. Strategies for menus. We want to integrate our dishes. We don't want to have it in a little side item down at the bottom, an afterthought. If we can add these things throughout the menu and position them just as if they were any other part of your menu, and not just, oh, by the way, we do offer this. And we want to have strong storytelling about the dishes, just as we do with everything else. So we want to be talking about local, seasonal, sustainably sourcing notes, and choosing the plant-based meals for health rather than, and environmental reasons rather than anything else. We've noted that as well. Crafted with seasonal, locally sourced vegetables always adds to the appeal of something without being especially preachy. And we want to use the flavor-driven names, smoky mushroom tacos instead of vegan tacos. So if we can not just have the side salad, not just have the pasta with tomato sauce, but also having 25 to 30% of your plant-based menus as main dishes really goes a long way in making your restaurant something that's going to be on our list week after week. And as the last slide, the person who's going to be there is going to be there all the time if you're offering these things. And we want to be able to train the staff to authentically recommend the dishes, and as part of a daily special or as part of describing the menu, and not just have them say what the dish is when someone asks for it. So just to be normalizing the inclusion of vegan dishes in their menus. And we've already talked about the wonderful part of desserts and how we have to have that as well. Talking about adding descriptors to your menu, I'll never forget one of the first menus that I was a consultant on was a colleague in Boulder, Colorado, and he had on his menu a great steaming bowl of antioxidants, when what he really meant to say was a great bowl of curried roasted carrot and butternut squash plus ginger soup with toasted pepitas and a reduced drizzle of apple cider vinegar. And you just have to really know the words to say, and really that's what we're talking about. So we have some anecdotal evidence that vegan menus are here to stay. We also have some hard facts. Campbell Soup, which is quite mainstream, they used to be in Camden, New Jersey, near to when I am, and when we were young, if we crossed the bridge, we could smell what soup they were making that day. They no longer manufacture there, but their headquarters are still there. But they have gone deep into vegan territory, notably with a couple of new items that they're going to have on the shelves, such as a vegan, not vegetarian, but vegan chili, and some of their tomato soup as well. And the statistic that they're referencing is that their tomato soup is up 55% year over year, and that they're expecting the vegan market in the next 5 years to be worth about 109, almost $110 billion. That is a very big number for us. Mark Cuban, who is my favorite shark from Shark Tank, invested almost $750,000 in Rebel cheese, which is a fantastic vegan cheese. If you haven't tried it, I recommend that you do so. And then we'll get to our vegan protein, which we've talked about as well. And so if you take a look at some of these things, you'll know where I'm going with them, and tell me if you think this sounds familiar. Chocolate, phyllo, dough, cashews, tahina, pistachios. If you think that you know what chocolate, phyllo, tahina, and pistachios are, this is the Dubai chocolate bar, which is, if it's not milk chocolate, it is a vegan item. So eat that all you want, but look at the amount of protein that would be contained in that. And some of the other things that we know to have high protein sources, almonds, of course, peanut butter. And since we're going into pumpkin spiced everything season, pumpkin seeds have one of the highest percentages per 3.5 ounces, 100 grams per serving there. So good to know. I think everything else that has been talked about, I don't want to strain. I know that we're running out of time. We want to leave room for questions and answers.
I think it is going out tomorrow. We have a handout for everyone that has a few recipes, one from each of us. And they're all super high in protein. They are all tofu based. So if you are still on the ooh, icky tofu train, it's time to evolve. You will see that tofu is a master of disguises. It can have many different forms. It's going to delight you. I trust this.
Yep.
Any quick questions before we send you on your way?
Yes, we have a few minutes, just like a couple minutes for questions or comments. So if you have a question or comment, please show your screen, unmute yourself, and raise your virtual hand, and Ellen will call on you.
But we love you all for coming.
I wanted to mention while everybody's still on here that because it's such a great note from Kathy about the pumpkin seeds, how high they are in protein. And actually pumpkin seeds are can make an amazing substitute for ricotta cheese. And it's so easy to make, and like literally it takes a few minutes and you have this beautiful very lovely kind of green version of of ricotta cheese. And it's great for using for stuffed shells. It's great for I've used it to make cannoli. You can just do so much with it. And but it's also like it's a whole food ingredient, and it's unbelievably easy to make, and it's also incredibly affordable. And I believe there are recipes in Mastering the Art of Plant-Based Cooking for it.
That's what I was going to ask. And my quick question for you, Kristen, is as you were developing recipes for that book, was there anything that just really surprised you?
Well, the book has over 300 recipes in it, so it was quite a big lift. We worked with about a dozen different, or maybe 2 dozen different recipe developers from around the world. So a lot of the recipes are Joe's recipes, but then at least half the recipes were developed by other people, or more than half the recipes. 25 of them are mine. So I think probably um, I think it was just like the depth and breadth of the recipes. If there was a surprise, it was just like, I mean, not necessarily a surprise, but maybe sort of a joy in that, with how many different things we had from all over the world, recipes that were not familiar to me, or that were just made in ways that I did not expect, which was fun. I think if there was something that was surprising to me, it was that I thought I was going to hate making miso, because there is a recipe for miso in there, but I loved making miso. It's actually really easy to make. And once you kind of get on it's like a rabbit hole you fall down, and then you kind of really get into making miso. And I already loved miso as an ingredient, and I purchased it from a lot of different miso makers, different varieties of it, but making it home was really fun. And I love doing that. And actually, the pumpkin seed ricotta. I hadn't done that before, but that kind of came out of the fact that Joe and I are both really big fans, if you've ever seen it before, of pumfu, which is a tofu. You can buy it in the store. It's tofu made from pumpkin seeds, and
Oh,
it is absolutely delicious. It's absolutely delicious. And we, like, one day he and I were like, well, what is it made out of? And we look at the package, we're like, pumpkin seeds and water? Okay. Like, we should be able to make that. And so he was like, I'm gonna make that at home. And then, from there kind of was like, well, we could do this as a ricotta cheese also. And that was just like one of those fun things that kind of came out of it. So I think that, the surprise was just kind of like playing around with ingredients that I hadn't had a chance to play around with before.
wonderful. Thank you so much, Kristen and Kathy and Ellen.
Well, thank you, and thank everyone for coming.
Thank you so much.
Before we say goodbye for now, here's some news that may interest you. On October 7th, Live Online will host a panel discussion called Weighing In on GLP-1s, the growing impact of weight loss medications on the industry, society, and our appetites. This event follows up an earlier table talk from 2024 organized by the San Francisco chapter. On November 11th, Live Online will offer a useful program of holiday entertaining tips and tricks. Who in your chapter is your role model as a party host? Could it be you? Please reach out to me, cry4@aol.com, so we can organize a can't miss holiday program in November. Thanks all, everyone. That's all for today. I appreciate your joining us in real time. I'm your host, Sheila Cry, wishing you a good day and hoping to see you again on October 7th. Goodbye for now.